I never expected Christmas morning to hit me the way it did, like a quiet punch to my chest that knocked the breath out of me without anyone noticing. Because when I stepped into my parents' living room in Portland, everything looked so warm, so peaceful, so picture-perfect that for a moment I actually thought this year might be different. The house smelled like cinnamon candles, apple pie, and the kind of winter comfort that usually makes people feel loved, but instead the scent felt heavy, almost mocking, because the room was filled with shiny gift bags, bright wrapping papers, big bows, and happy chatter, yet somehow I already felt like the outsider. I walked in carrying a small box of homemade cookies. Cookies I baked the night before with real effort, because I thought even if they didn't want a gift, at least I could bring something simple. But the moment I stepped inside, I froze. Every single person in the room looked at me, then at my hands, and then back at each other with this strange expression. My sister Lily leaned toward our cousin and whispered just loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Wow, she really came empty-handed?" My stomach dropped. Empty-handed? They told me not to bring anything. They repeated it to me 3 times in our family group chat. "Don't buy gifts this year, okay? We're keeping it simple." I remember reading the message twice just to make sure. I even replied, "Are you sure?" And they all said the same thing, "Yes. Don't bring anything." But here I was standing in a room full of expensive gift bags and glittering boxes, feeling like the only fool who believed them. My aunt chuckled under her breath, the kind of laugh meant to cut without leaving a mark. My mom didn't laugh, but she did something worse. She smiled that disappointed smile she reserved only for me. The smile that said I had embarrassed her yet again. She tilted her head almost sadly, as if I had ruined her perfect holiday photo by showing up as myself. And in that moment I wished I had stayed home. I wished I hadn't walked into this place thinking maybe, just maybe, I would be treated like part of the family this year. But the room had already shifted, and every look, every whisper, every tiny expression told me exactly what was happening. I wasn't just forgotten, I was being judged. Quietly, sharply, cruelly. I tried to act normal, to smile politely, to hand over my small box of cookies to the counter like it meant nothing, but inside something cracked. I could feel the sting of humiliation climb up my neck like heat in the cold air. And it was worse because I realized this wasn't an accident. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This felt planned. Like they all knew I would show up without a gift, and they all came prepared to enjoy the moment. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, long enough to hear another cousin whisper, "She really doesn't think things through, does she?" And long enough to see my sister shake her head dramatically, as if she pitied me. My throat tightened so much I had to swallow twice just to breathe. I looked around the room, letting my eyes take in all the details. The stockings hung above the fireplace, each stuffed full, mine noticeably thinner than everyone else's. The giant Christmas tree glowing beautifully in the corner with gold ornaments, each reflecting the warm lights of the room. The table piled with gifts that were clearly bought with care, money, and intention. And in the middle of all that comfort and celebration stood I, the one who followed instructions, the one who trusted their words, and the one now being turned into a Christmas joke. My mom walked over to Lily, touched her arm, and whispered something that made Lily smirk. I could feel the sting even from across the room. For years I tried telling myself I was too sensitive, too emotional, that maybe I misunderstood things, but today it was clear. The message wasn't hidden. It wasn't subtle. It was loud, sharp, and meant to hurt. I wasn't someone worth including. I was someone worth embarrassing. "Well," my aunt said loudly, "at least she showed up." The room laughed. My cheeks burned. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run straight back to my car and drive home, but leaving would only make them talk more, and I refused to give them that satisfaction. So instead I walked deeper into the room, pretending to feel comfortable even though my chest felt heavy and my hands felt cold. "Merry Christmas," I said quietly, but no one answered except my dad, who gave a distracted nod before turning back to the TV. I sat on the edge of the couch while my family continued exchanging gifts, each person taking turns opening presents, reading cards, hugging, laughing, and showing off what they got. My sister opened a new iPad from my parents. My cousin opened a designer handbag. My aunt received a luxury scarf. And every time someone opened a gift, they looked at me with that same expression. Pity mixed with mockery. "Oh, don't worry," Lily said at one point, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Next year, maybe she'll remember Christmas actually involves gifts." My mother laughed softly. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing myself not to react, not to cry, not to let them know how deeply the moment cut me. Because as painful as it was, I suddenly saw it clearly. This was not about a gift. This was about power, about control, about making me feel small in a house where I grew up never feeling wanted. And I realized something else. This moment, this humiliation, was exactly the trigger I needed. Because deep inside me, something else woke up. Not anger. Not sadness. Not even shock. What woke up inside me was clarity. Cold, calm clarity. I looked around the room again, but this time I wasn't the same person who walked in. Their whispers didn't hit the same way. Their laughter didn't shake me. Instead of shrinking, I sat taller. Instead of breaking, I stitched myself back together with a new kind of strength. They thought I came empty-handed. They thought they could embarrass me without consequence. They thought this Christmas would be like every other year, where they laughed and I stayed quiet. But as I watched them open boxes and tear through ribbons, I felt a quiet confidence build inside me. Because I knew something they didn't. Something big. Something life-changing. Something that would flip this entire Christmas upside down. They didn't know that while they spent their time mocking me for bringing nothing, I had already prepared the biggest surprise of the day. I wasn't empty-handed. I was just patient. And as the room filled with gifts I didn't give and laughter I wasn't part of, I whispered silently to myself, "This is the last Christmas they will ever try to humiliate me." I kept a soft smile on my face even though every word they threw at me felt like tiny needles. And while they laughed and whispered, something inside me hardened in a way I had never felt before, like a layer of steel forming quietly beneath my skin. Christmas was supposed to be peaceful, filled with kindness and warm memories, but instead it reminded me exactly where I stood in this family. The easy target, the quiet daughter, the one they believed would take anything without fighting back. But they didn't know that this year, I wasn't the same girl they had mocked my entire life. I wasn't fragile anymore. I wasn't hungry for their approval anymore. What they didn't know, what none of them even cared enough to ask, was that I had spent the past few months working harder than I ever had in my life, doing something bigger than buying gifts or baking cookies. While they were busy gossiping about each other's clothes, vacations, and purchases, I was moving in silence, building something steady and strong under the surface. And while they sat on my parents' couch calling me empty-handed, they had no idea that the biggest surprise of this Christmas didn't belong to the tree, the gifts, or the shiny wrapping paper. It belonged to me. I watched them from across the room, watching how they passed gifts back and forth like I wasn't even in the picture. I listened carefully as they laughed about things that weren't funny, making comments about my simple clothes, my quiet nature, my lack of relationships or children, all the things they thought proved I was behind in life. Each remark slipped into my memory like cold ammunition, stored and sorted without emotion. I didn't argue with them. I didn't explain myself. I didn't stand up or shout or make excuses. I just sat there calmly, letting them believe I was weak, letting them believe I had nothing to offer. Because the less they saw me, the easier it was for me to surprise them. My sister Lily walked around the room like she was the Christmas angel herself, wearing a gold sweater and showing off her new iPad while people congratulated her for finally getting something she deserved. My aunt handed out crocheted scarves she made for everyone except me. She said she ran out of yarn, even though she somehow had enough to make a scarf for her neighbor's daughter, who wasn't even there. My cousin rolled her eyes every time I spoke, like my voice was a background noise she wished would stop. And my mother? She watched me with quiet annoyance, as if my very presence ruined her perfect holiday photo. But I wasn't paying attention to their gifts or their games. My eyes were on the house, the walls, the ceilings, the furniture, the floorboards. The same house I had grown up in, the same house where I had spent years being treated as second, no last place. And as they mocked me, I felt a strange mix of sadness and power rise inside me, because they were sitting inside their favorite place in the world, and they had no idea I now owned it. Not partially, not someday, right now. For the last 5 months, while they ignored me, ridiculed my quiet job, and acted like my life had no direction, I had been carefully planning something they would never expect. When my parents fell behind on mortgage payments earlier in the year, I stepped in secretly. I used the savings I had built from working overtime, living cheaply, and sacrificing vacations and luxuries. I spoke to the bank, signed documents, invested almost everything I had, and became the sole owner of the house. My parents agreed because they trusted me more than their own financial judgment. But I kept it quiet. I never bragged. I never explained. I didn't tell the family group chat. I didn't tell Lily, who would have used it as gossip. I didn't tell my aunt, who would have twisted it into a story about how I wanted attention. I didn't tell my cousins, who would have found a way to make it a joke. I kept the documents safe in a folder on my desk, waiting for a moment like this. A moment when the truth would speak louder than any insult they gave me. While they laughed, I thought back to the nights I stayed up until 2 a.m., filling out forms, calculating bills, talking to loan officers, and holding my breath, hoping I was making the right decision. I remembered sitting alone in my small apartment, eating cheap dinners because I was saving every dollar I could. I remembered walking to work instead of using my car to save gas. I remembered telling myself over and over again, "It will be worth it. It will be worth it." And now, as I watched my family opening luxury gifts and mocking the fact that I brought nothing, I finally understood that every sacrifice, every long night, every quiet decision, it was all leading to this Christmas moment. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be cruel. It wasn't going to match their nastiness. My revenge was going to be simple and silent, the kind of surprise that doesn't need shouting to be powerful. They thought I had nothing because I didn't wave a shopping bag in their faces. They thought I was unimportant because I wasn't loud or dramatic. They thought I was a failure because my life didn't look like theirs. But they didn't know that while they judged me for things that didn't matter, I was building something that did. They didn't know that while they mocked me for arriving empty-handed, I had brought something worth more than every wrapped present in the room. So I stayed quiet, watching them tear through paper and ribbon like children, letting them enjoy their moment. I studied their faces, memorizing the expressions of people who thought they had everything. And I felt a strange peace settle into my chest. Because deep down I knew that in just a few hours everything would change. I knew that the moment I took out the envelope in my coat pocket, the envelope containing the official document with my name on the title deed, the room would fall silent. I knew my sister's smirk would disappear. I knew my mother's disappointed smile would crack. I knew my aunt's smug look would melt away. And I knew they would finally see me, not as the quiet, weak, empty-handed daughter, but as the person who now held the greatest power in the room. But I didn't rush. I didn't crave the reveal. I wanted to savor this strange calm, this quiet transformation happening inside me, because for the first time in years I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel less than them. I felt steady, strong, ready. So I sat there drinking my hot chocolate, listening to the laughter that wasn't meant for me, letting them enjoy their ignorance. They were mocking the wrong person on the wrong day in the wrong house. And they had no idea that the biggest Christmas gift, the one they didn't ask for, didn't expect, and definitely didn't deserve, was already waiting in my pocket. My revenge wasn't loud. It was already happening. And the best part? They never saw it coming. By the time dinner began, the house felt different, not because the decorations had changed or the music had shifted, but because I finally understood that everyone in that room had already decided who I was before I even arrived. They looked at me like I was unprepared, lazy, irresponsible, and careless, even though it was their message, "Don't bring gifts this year," that I had followed. As the family gathered around the long wooden dining table, plates full of roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and Christmas ham, the whispers continued like tiny daggers being pushed under my skin. My aunt muttered something about common sense. My cousin snickered as she scrolled through her phone. Lily leaned toward my mother and said, "I knew she wouldn't bother." My mother responded with a sad sigh, as if I had personally embarrassed her in front of the world. And yet, even with all their comments, even with all the mocking tones, even with their eyes rolling every time I moved or spoke, I felt calm, almost peaceful, because I knew something they didn't. The real gift of this Christmas wasn't wrapped under the tree. It wasn't tied with a ribbon. It wasn't placed in a shiny box. The real gift was hidden inside my coat pocket, quiet and powerful, waiting for the right moment to speak for me. I didn't touch my food at first. I simply sat back and watched, listening to the laughter that echoed around the table. The kind of laughter meant to remind me that I didn't belong. But instead of shrinking, I watched it all with a new clarity. My family loved control. They loved hierarchy. They loved knowing who was important and who wasn't. And for years I had been the one at the bottom of that ladder. But today the latter was mine. They just didn't know it yet. My father, who usually tried to stay out of drama, asked, "Are you enjoying dinner?" But he didn't look me in the eye. Even he seemed embarrassed by the way everyone had treated me, but not enough to say something. That part hurt more than the jokes. But I pushed the sting aside because the time was coming, the moment when their laughter would freeze, when their voices would fall quiet, when the table would shift. And I could feel the moment arriving like a slow wave building in the distance. After the plates were passed around and everyone settled into their seats, still glowing from the excitement of opening their gifts, still whispering about what they received, still smirking at my empty place setting, I finally moved. I reached into my coat, calmly, slowly, and pulled out the small cream-colored envelope I had kept with me since the morning. I placed it gently on the table in front of me. The simple sound of the paper touching the wood made the entire room pause. It was almost funny how fast they stopped talking. Every eye shifted to me, confused, surprised, annoyed, some even amused. Lily raised her eyebrow dramatically and said in a mocking tone, "Oh, she did bring something." Someone laughed. Someone else whispered, "Here we go." But I didn't look at them. I didn't react to their voices or their tone. I simply spoke in a soft, steady voice that carried through the entire room. "I wasn't sure when I was supposed to give this," I said, "since I was told not to bring gifts this year." That one sentence shut every mouth at the table. My mother's smile collapsed instantly. Lily's smirk vanished. My aunt's fork hovered midair. And the silence tasted sweeter than any Christmas dessert. Slowly, I opened the envelope, pulled out the neatly folded papers, and placed them on the table where everyone could see. First, no one understood. They leaned forward, trying to read the black text on the document. Then my cousin's eyes widened. Then my aunt gasped. Then my sister's face drained of color. And my mother's breath caught in her throat so loudly I actually heard it. Because the document sitting in the middle of the Christmas dinner table wasn't just any paper. It was the official property title to the house we were sitting in, the house they decorated, the house they mocked me inside, the house they believed belonged solely to my parents. But it didn't. Not anymore. My name, my full name, was printed clearly on the deed. Owner, sole mortgage holder, legal authority, all of it, in black and white, in front of the entire family. Lily dropped her fork. It hit the plate with a sharp clatter that echoed across the dining room. What is this?" Lily whispered, her voice suddenly thin. "That," my mother stuttered, reaching for the papers with shaking hands. "That can't be how when?" My aunt blinked like she was seeing a ghost. Is this real?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand up. I didn't try to make a dramatic scene. I just folded my hands neatly and nodded. "Yes," I said softly. "It's real. I bought the house." The room broke into stunned silence. Real silence, the kind that sinks deep and heavy, filling every corner of the room. My mother looked at my father, her eyes wide and full of panic. You sold the house to her?" she whispered. My dad swallowed hard. "We didn't sell it," he said quietly. "She helped us when we were behind on payments. The bank approved everything in her name." My aunt gasped again, louder this time. My cousin covered her mouth. Lily looked like she was about to cry, or scream. And for the first time in my life, the room wasn't laughing at me. The room was scared of me. They didn't understand how I had done it. They didn't understand when it happened. They didn't understand why I hadn't told them. But they didn't need to understand any of that. What they needed to understand was the power they had mocked. The power they had ignored. The power they thought I never had. After letting the silence sit long enough for the truth to sink in, I finally spoke the words that had been sitting quietly inside my heart. "Next year," I said calmly, "don't worry. I'll decide who gets invited." My mother closed her eyes like the words physically hit her. Lily looked like she had swallowed fire. My aunt turned bright red. And yet I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel petty. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt free. I felt like years of humiliation and disrespect had finally been answered with the truth loud enough to echo through every Christmas still to come. I stood up, gathered the envelope, slid the papers back inside, and tucked it into my coat again. No shouting. No dramatic exit. No insults. Just quiet strength. The kind my family had never seen before. When I walked toward the kitchen, I could feel all their eyes following me. Not with mockery, not with laughter, but with a stunned, shaken respect they never believed I deserved. And as I refilled my glass of water, listening to the choking silence behind me, I finally whispered to myself the words I had waited years to feel. I won Christmas.